My name is Lena, and at 56 years old, I never thought my own son would try to poison me. James was once my sweet little boy, but somewhere along the way, he changed, especially after marrying Amanda. That family dinner last spring was supposed to bring us closer, but instead, I watched my son slip something into my drink while smirking at his wife. When I secretly switched our glasses, I had no idea it would end with me canceling their mortgage payments the very next day. Some might call it harsh, but when your own child tries to humiliate you in front of the entire family, there are consequences. If you're watching this right now, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments if you've ever had to stand up to family members who betrayed your trust. Now let me tell you how it all unfolded. I built my life from scratch after my husband Thomas passed away 15 years ago. He left me with our two children, James, who was 20 at the time, and Sarah, who was 18, along with a small insurance policy that barely covered the funeral expenses. I had to quickly transform from a part-time bookkeeper into the sole breadwinner, eventually opening my own accounting firm that grew into a successful business with 5 employees. Sarah was always my rock. She worked part-time jobs through college to help with expenses and never complained about our modest lifestyle. After graduating, she pursued a teaching career, married a wonderful man named Daniel, and gave me 2 beautiful grandchildren. Even today, she calls me daily and brings the kids over every Sunday afternoon. James was a different story. As a child, he was affectionate and creative, always drawing pictures for me and helping around the house. But during his teenage years, something shifted. He began expecting things rather than earning them. When Thomas died, James seemed to believe he was entitled to more than I could provide. While Sarah understood our financial limitations, James grew increasingly resentful and demanding. "Mom, Dad would have wanted me to have the best education," he would say when asking for money for a private university I couldn't afford. Despite my explanations about financial reality, he took it as personal rejection. The turning point came when James met Amanda during his second year of college. She came from a wealthy family and had never known financial struggle. From our first meeting, I sensed she looked down on our modest home and lifestyle. James quickly adopted her expensive tastes and expectations. "You should see Amanda's parents' house, Mom. They have a pool and a home theater. Her dad bought her a brand new car for her birthday." James would tell me, the implication clear in his tone. After they married 7 years ago, I tried to maintain a good relationship with them. I attended their lavish wedding paid for by Amanda's parents and gave them a significant portion of my savings as a wedding gift, hoping it would help them start their life together. Instead, they spent it on a luxury honeymoon that lasted 3 weeks. When they returned, James announced they'd found their dream house but needed help with the down payment. Against my financial advisor's strong recommendations, I withdrew money from my retirement account, incurring penalties to help them. 6 months later, they were struggling with the mortgage payments. "Mom, we're going to lose the house," James said during one of his rare visits. "The bank needs a co-signer with better credit or they'll foreclose." Sarah warned me not to do it. "They're using you, Mom. They live beyond their means and expect you to bail them out." But the thought of my son losing his home overrode my better judgment. I co-signed the mortgage, essentially becoming legally responsible for a $450,000 loan on a house with more bathrooms than people living in it. Over the next few years, my relationship with James and Amanda deteriorated further. They rarely visited unless they needed something. When I did see them, Amanda would make subtle digs about my clothes, my hair, or my quaint home. James would sit silently sometimes, smirking at her comments. Last Christmas, I overheard Amanda telling her cousin, "We only visit the old lady because she's our financial safety net. Once she's gone, we'll inherit everything anyway." I pretended not to hear, but those words cut deep. Despite everything, I continued helping them, financially paying for car repairs, covering their property taxes. When they claimed to be short, even funding an expensive vacation they insisted they needed for their mental health. Sarah grew increasingly concerned. "Mom, you're enabling their behavior. They're adults who should be responsible for themselves. I knew she was right, but breaking the pattern seemed impossible. I'd been supporting James for so long that it had become our normal dynamic. Part of me still saw him as that sweet little boy who needed my protection, even though that child had long since disappeared. Spring arrived with unusually warm weather and a sense of renewal that inspired me to try once more to repair our family relationships. After a particularly restless night thinking about James and Amanda, I decided to host a family dinner, something we hadn't done in nearly 2 years. "I want everyone to come," I told Sarah over coffee one morning. "You and Daniel and the kids, James and Amanda, even Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert. Maybe if we're all together, things will feel normal again." Sarah looked skeptical. "Mom, are you sure that's a good idea? The last time we were all together, Amanda spent the whole time making snide comments and James acted like you were invisible. People can change." I insisted more to convince myself than her. "Maybe they've matured. Besides, families should be together occasionally." Sarah squeezed my hand. "I'll help you plan it, but please don't get your hopes up too high." I spent the next 2 weeks planning every detail. I created a menu featuring everyone's favorites: Thomas's famous pot roast recipe, Sarah's preferred garlic mashed potatoes, and even James's favorite chocolate pecan pie. I deep cleaned the house, bought new dinnerware, and even replaced the dining room curtains with a cheerful floral pattern. The Wednesday before the Saturday dinner, I called James to confirm they were coming. Amanda answered. "Oh, Lena," she said, never calling me Mom, despite 7 years of marriage to my son. "Yes, we'll be there. James is very busy with work right now, but we've marked it on our calendar." "Wonderful," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "I'm making all of James's favorites. Is there anything special you'd like me to prepare?" "No need to go to any trouble for me," she replied in that tone that suggested anything I made wouldn't meet her standards anyway. "By the way, who else is coming? Will it be just family, or are you inviting your friends?" She said friends, as if it were a foreign concept that someone my age might have them. I listed the guests: 8 adults and 2 children total. "It should be a nice, intimate gathering." Interesting," she said vaguely. "And what time did you say again? 7? 6, I corrected. "Dinner will be served at 6:30. Later that afternoon, I was in the garden cutting fresh flowers for the table when I heard James's voice from the driveway. I was about to call out a greeting when I realized he was on his phone, and his tone made me pause. "Yeah, we'll be there. Mom's having some big family dinner," he was saying to someone. "Amanda thinks we should go keep up appearances, you know. Besides, we need to stay on her good side until we figure out the investment thing." The investment thing he referred to was his recent request for $50,000 to invest in a friend's startup company. I had expressed doubts about the venture, but hadn't given him a definitive answer yet. I remained hidden behind the rose bushes, my heart sinking as he continued. "Anyway, it'll probably be boring as hell, but maybe we can have some fun with it." He laughed at something the person on the other end said. "Yeah, exactly. Gotta go talk later." As his car pulled away, I stood among my flowers, feeling a hollow ache in my chest. Despite my hopes, it seemed this dinner wouldn't be the reconciliation I'd envisioned. Still, I continued with my preparations, determined to at least try. The day before the dinner, I received a strange call from Amanda. "Lena, quick question for the dinner tomorrow. Are you serving wine or cocktails before the meal?" "Both," I answered, surprised by her interest. "I've bought red and white wine, and I can make simple cocktails for anyone who prefers them." "Perfect," she said, sounding unusually pleased. "James and I will bring a special bottle of wine too. See you tomorrow." Something about the call felt off, but I pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the mountain of preparations still ahead of me. Saturday arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine streaming through windows and birds singing in the backyard maple tree. I'd been up since dawn, checking and rechecking every detail. The table was set with my best china and the fresh flowers from my garden. The house smelled of slow-roasting meat and baking bread. Sarah and her family arrived first an hour early, as promised to help with final preparations. "Mom, the house looks beautiful," Sarah said, hugging me tightly. "You've outdone yourself." Her husband Daniel nodded in agreement. "Seriously, Lena, this is impressive." He handed me a bottle of my favorite Chardonnay. "A little thank you for always taking such good care of us." My grandchildren Emma and Noah, aged 7 and 5, ran to me with handmade cards. "We made these for you, Grandma," Emma announced proudly. For a moment, surrounded by their genuine affection, I wondered why I'd gone to so much trouble for James and Amanda when I already had this much love in my life. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert arrived next, bearing a fruit tart from my favorite bakery. Patricia, my late husband's sister, had always been kind to me even after Thomas passed. "Lena, you look wonderful," she said, embracing me. "Is that a new haircut? It takes years off your face." By 6:15, everyone was gathered in the living room with drinks chatting comfortably, everyone except James and Amanda. At 6:30, I checked my phone for messages. Nothing. "Should we start without them?" Uncle Robert asked, checking his watch. "Let's give them a few more minutes," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. At 6:45, the doorbell finally rang. James and Amanda stood on the porch, neither looking particularly apologetic for their lateness. "Traffic was awful," Amanda said by way of greeting, handing me a bottle of wine without making eye contact. She was dressed as if for a fancy restaurant in a designer dress I recognized from a magazine, completely overdressed for our family gathering. James gave me a quick, perfunctory hug. "Place looks nice, Mom." They moved past me into the living room, where Amanda immediately began complimenting Patricia on her jewelry, her voice dripping with the fake warmth she reserved for people she wanted to impress. I served drinks wine for most adults, juice for the children, and cocktails for Uncle Robert and James, who both preferred whiskey sours. Amanda declined anything, saying she wasn't thirsty yet. As everyone mingled, I noticed James watching me with an odd intensity while whispering something to Amanda. She giggled behind her hand, both of them glancing my way. "Dinner's ready," I announced after about 20 minutes of increasingly awkward small talk. "Please, everyone find your place cards at the table." I'd arranged the seating carefully, Sarah between James and Amanda, to act as a buffer, the children next to Daniel and Patricia and Robert across from them. I sat at the head of the table, trying to maintain a hostess smile, despite the tension I could feel building. As everyone settled into their seats, Amanda suddenly spoke up. "Oh, Lena, James wanted to fix you a special drink. He's been taking a mixology class, haven't you, honey?" James nodded, already standing. "I've been waiting for a chance to make you my signature cocktail, Mom. You'll love it." Before I could respond, he had taken my water glass to the kitchen. I noticed Amanda watching the kitchen doorway with barely concealed anticipation, her eyes glinting with something that made me uneasy. James returned with a pale pink drink garnished with a slice of lime. "A raspberry gin fizz," he announced, placing it beside my plate with unusual ceremony. "Just for you." "How thoughtful," I murmured, noticing the drink looked slightly cloudy, different from any gin fizz I'd seen before. As I served the food, I noticed James and Amanda exchanging glances repeatedly, both watching me with unusual attention. I lifted the glass, pretending to sip while observing their reactions. James leaned forward slightly, while Amanda's lips curved in a small, expectant smile. I set the glass down, untouched. "This looks lovely, but I think I'll wait until after I've served everyone." A flicker of impatience crossed James's face. "It's better when it's fresh, Mom. The bubbles, you know." "I'll try it in a minute," I promised, continuing to distribute the food. As I served Sarah's plate, she leaned close and whispered, "Is everything okay? You seem tense." I nodded slightly, but felt increasingly certain something was wrong. When I excused myself to get more gravy from the kitchen, I made a detour to the downstairs bathroom in the hallway, which shared a wall with the dining room. Through the thin wall, I could hear James and Amanda's hushed voices. "Did she drink it yet?" Amanda was asking. James's response was frustrated. No, she's being difficult as usual, but she will. Amanda giggled. I can't wait to see her face when it kicks in. How much did you put in? Enough, James replied. Trust me, it'll work. She'll be running to the bathroom every 5 minutes for the rest of the night. Maybe next time, she'll think twice before lecturing us about our spending. My blood ran cold. My own son had put something in my drink, likely a laxative, to humiliate me in front of our family. The cruelty of it took my breath away. I stood frozen for a moment, tears threatening to spill. Then something hardened inside me. I dried my eyes, straightened my shoulders, and returned to the dining room with a plan forming in my mind. Back at the table, I noticed Amanda had finally poured herself a glass of water. James was watching me expectantly as I took my seat. Sorry for the delay, everyone, I said with forced cheerfulness. Now shall we toast to family? I reached for my contaminated drink, but as I lifted it, I deliberately bumped Amanda's arm, causing her to spill a few drops of water on her expensive dress. Oh my goodness, I'm so clumsy. Let me help you with that, I exclaimed, grabbing my napkin and dabbing at her dress. In the commotion, I switched our glasses my pink cocktail for her water. The movement was quick and subtle, covered by my apparent concern for her dress. It's fine, Amanda said stiffly, clearly annoyed, but trying to maintain her composure in front of the others. Well then, I smiled, raising what was now her water glass. To family, those who support us through thick and thin. Everyone raised their glasses. I watched as Amanda, without looking closely at her drink, took a large swallow of the pink cocktail that had been meant for me. James, focused on me, hadn't noticed the switch. This is delicious, James, Amanda said, automatically, clearly not paying attention to what she was drinking. You should make these more often. James looked confused for a split second before recovering. Glad you like it, he said, shooting me a disappointed glance as he realized I was drinking water. The dinner continued with the usual family conversations. Sarah talked about her students, Daniel discussed his recent promotion, and Patricia shared news about cousins from the West Coast. Throughout it all, I noticed James becoming increasingly agitated as I showed no signs of digestive distress. About 20 minutes into the meal, Amanda began shifting uncomfortably in her seat. She dabbed at her forehead with her napkin. Is it hot in here? She asked, her face flushing slightly. The temperature seems fine to me, Aunt Patricia replied, looking concerned. Are you feeling all right, dear? Amanda nodded unconvincingly. Just a little warm. 5 minutes later, she excused herself abruptly and hurried from the room. When she returned several minutes later, her face was pale, and she avoided making eye contact with anyone. James leaned over and whispered something to her, to which she responded with a sharp glare. The realization was beginning to dawn on him that something had gone wrong with their plan. Amanda excused herself twice more during the main course, each time returning looking more uncomfortable than before. During dessert, she barely touched her pie before suddenly standing. I'm sorry, she said, her voice strained. I'm not feeling well. James, I think we should go. James looked torn between concern for his wife and frustration at their failed prank. But we just got here, he protested weakly. Now, James, Amanda insisted, her face contorted with discomfort. Is there anything I can do to help? I asked innocently. Some medicine, perhaps? No, Amanda snapped, then forced a smile. No, thank you. I think I just need to get home. As they made hasty goodbyes, I noticed James staring at the pink drink beside Amanda's plate, finally understanding what had happened. His eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, I saw shock there. Not just that his plan had failed, but perhaps recognition that I had outmaneuvered him. After they left, Sarah approached me in the kitchen as I was beginning to clean up. What really happened with Amanda? She asked quietly. 1 minute she was fine, the next she couldn't get out of here fast enough. I considered telling Sarah everything, but decided against burdening her with the ugly truth. Food disagreement, I suppose, I said vaguely. These things happen. The rest of the evening passed pleasantly without James and Amanda's toxic presence. My grandchildren helped clear the table, Aunt Patricia insisted on washing dishes, and Uncle Robert entertained us with stories from his recent fishing trip. By the time everyone left around 10 o'clock, the tension from earlier had dissipated. Alone in my house, I sat in Thomas's old armchair and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. My son, my own child, had deliberately tried to humiliate me. The betrayal cut deeper than any hurt I'd experienced since losing Thomas. As tears slid down my cheeks, my sadness gradually transformed into something else: resolve. For years, I'd allowed James and Amanda to take advantage of my love and generosity. I'd made excuses for their behavior, blamed myself for their shortcomings, and continued to support them financially despite their complete lack of gratitude. Tonight had shown me who they truly were, and it was time finally for there to be consequences. The next morning, at precisely 8:17 a.m., my phone rang. James's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "How could you?" he demanded without preamble, his voice shaking with anger. "Amanda was sick all night. She couldn't stop going to the bathroom." "Good morning to you too, James," I replied calmly. "Don't play innocent, Mom. I know you switched the drinks. You embarrassed Amanda in front of everyone." The irony of his accusation was breathtaking. "Let me understand this correctly," I said slowly. "You're angry because Amanda drank something that you intended for me to drink." There was a moment of silence before James attempted to backpedal. "It was just supposed to be a harmless prank. Nothing dangerous." "A prank," I repeated flatly. "Putting laxatives in your mother's drink at a family dinner is your idea of a harmless prank. How did you know it was—" he began, then stopped, realizing he'd incriminated himself. "I heard you and Amanda talking in the dining room while I was in the bathroom," I explained. "I heard everything, James, how you wanted to humiliate me, how you thought it was funny." Another pause. "We didn't mean any harm," he insisted, his tone defensive rather than apologetic. "It was just a joke. Amanda's been miserable all night because of what you did." "What I did?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "James, you put laxatives in my drink. The only thing I did was ensure you didn't succeed in humiliating me in front of our family." "Whatever," he said dismissively. "The point is, you need to apologize to Amanda. She wants you to call her and say you're sorry." I laughed incredulously. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious," he snapped. "She's really upset, and honestly, so am I. After everything we've been through, I can't believe you'd do something like this." The conversation had entered the realm of the absurd. "James, listen to yourself. You attempted to drug me, and now you want me to apologize because your plan backfired." "Fine," he said after a moment. "If that's how you want to be, then don't expect to hear from us again. We're done." "Before you hang up," I said quickly, "I want you to know I've been doing some thinking about our financial arrangements." His tone immediately changed. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'll be reviewing all the financial assistance I've been providing you and Amanda, starting with the mortgage." "Mom, come on," he said, alarm replacing anger. "You can't be serious. It was just a stupid joke." "I'm very serious," I replied. "In fact, I'll be calling the bank first thing tomorrow morning. As a co-signer on your mortgage, I have certain rights and certain responsibilities." "What are you saying?" His voice had risen in pitch. "I'm saying that I'm removing myself from any future financial obligations regarding your house. You and Amanda are adults. It's time you took full responsibility for your choices." "You can't do that," he shouted. "We'll lose the house. Is that what you want?" "What I want," I said quietly, "is a son who wouldn't try to poison his mother as a joke. Since I don't have that, I'll settle for protecting myself from further exploitation." "This is insane," he spluttered. You're overreacting to a stupid prank because you can't take a joke. Fine, I'm sorry if your feelings got hurt, but… Goodbye, James. I interrupted. I suggest you start looking into refinancing options. I ended the call as he was still protesting. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in years, it wasn't from anxiety or hurt. It was from a sense of liberation. True to my word, I called my financial advisor first thing Monday morning and explained the situation in general terms, saying only that I needed to remove myself from James's mortgage due to a significant breach of trust. I've been warning you about this arrangement for years. Martin, my advisor of 15 years, reminded me gently. Co-signing is always risky, especially with family. I know, I acknowledged. I should have listened to you sooner. Can you help me now? Martin explained that as a co-signer, I couldn't simply remove myself from the loan. The bank would need to approve a loan modification, which would require James and Amanda to qualify for the mortgage on their own merits. Given their payment history and current income-to-debt ratio, that's unlikely to happen, Martin said frankly. What are my options then? You could continue making payments to protect your own credit even if they default, he suggested. Or you could let the bank know you'll no longer be making payments on their behalf, which would likely trigger foreclosure proceedings if they can't pay. Neither option was ideal, but I knew what I had to do. After consulting with a lawyer to understand the full implications, I notified the bank that I would no longer be making payments on the loan. Within days, James and Amanda received formal notice from the bank that their mortgage was at risk of default unless they could bring the payments current and qualify for refinancing on their own. The calls started immediately, first angry, then pleading, then desperate. James alternated between threats and tearful apologies. Amanda called Sarah, trying to get her to intervene on their behalf. They even sent Amanda's father to my house, though he quickly retreated when I showed him printed screenshots of text messages from previous occasions when James and Amanda had mocked me behind my back. I had no idea, Amanda's father said, looking genuinely shocked. They told us you were being irrational and vindictive for no reason. There's always a reason, I replied. Sometimes it's just not the one people want to admit. As weeks passed, the reality of their situation became clearer. Amanda's parents refused to bail them out, saying it was time they learned financial responsibility. James lost his job due to repeatedly missing work while dealing with their housing crisis. The bank began formal foreclosure proceedings. Through it all, I maintained my resolve, though it wasn't easy. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I was being too harsh, if the punishment truly fit the crime. But then I would remember the callous way they had planned to humiliate me, the years of disrespect and exploitation, and I knew I was finally doing what should have been done long ago. Sarah supported my decision completely. They've been taking advantage of you for years, Mom, she said during one of our coffee dates. What they did was cruel and deliberate. There have to be consequences. Other family members were divided. Some thought I was overreacting to what they saw as a tasteless prank. Others, particularly those who had witnessed James and Amanda's behavior over the years, understood that this was merely the final straw after a long pattern of disrespect and entitlement. The hardest part wasn't the disapproval from some family members, or even the knowledge that James and Amanda might lose their home. It was accepting that my relationship with my son might never be repaired. Despite everything, he was still my child, and severing that bond, even when necessary, left a wound I wasn't sure would ever fully heal. 6 months after the dinner incident, I was working in my garden when a car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. To my surprise, Amanda stepped out alone. She looked different, her designer clothes replaced with simple jeans and a t-shirt, her perfectly styled hair now pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual edge of superiority. Cautiously, I invited her in. We sat at my kitchen table where she stared into the mug of tea I offered before finally speaking. "James and I are getting divorced," she said flatly. "I've filed the papers." I nodded, unsurprised, yet still saddened. "I'm sorry to hear that." She gave a short, humorless laugh. Are you? After what we did to you? I'm sorry for any genuine pain you're experiencing, I clarified. That doesn't mean I've forgotten what happened. Amanda looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. That's why I'm here. To tell you I'm sorry. Truly sorry. What we did was cruel and stupid and unforgivable. Her apology, so unexpected, momentarily left me speechless. The thing is, she continued, the drink wasn't even my idea. It was James's. He's done things like that before, pranks he calls them, but they're really just mean. I went along with it because… She trailed off, seeming to search for words. Because it's easier than standing up to him, I suggested. She nodded slowly. And because I was angry too. We were living beyond our means, and when you started questioning our financial decisions, I resented it. It was easier to blame you than admit we were being irresponsible. Where is James now? I asked. Staying with a friend. After we lost the house, things fell apart quickly. He couldn't handle the downgrade in lifestyle. She twisted her wedding ring absently. I've learned a lot these past few months. About him, about myself, about what really matters. And what have you concluded? Her eyes met mine directly for perhaps the first time in our relationship. That I've been wrong about many things, including you. That conversation marked the beginning of an unexpected new chapter. Amanda and I would never be close, but there was a newfound honesty between us that allowed for civil interactions. She found a job as an administrative assistant, moved into a modest apartment, and began the process of rebuilding her life independently. James, however, continued his downward spiral. He refused to accept responsibility for his actions, instead blaming me, Amanda, the bank, the economy, anyone but himself for his problems. He made a few half-hearted attempts at reconciliation, but always with strings attached, always with financial motives transparent beneath surface apologies. Sarah remained my steadfast support through everything. You did the right thing, she reassured me repeatedly. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. As the one-year anniversary of the dinner incident approached, I found myself reflecting on all that had changed. I'd sold my accounting firm to my most trusted employee and was enjoying a comfortable semi-retirement. I'd joined a gardening club and a book group, making new friends who knew me as I was now rather than who I had been as a wife or mother. I'd even begun seeing a kind widower named Richard who shared my love of classical music and birdwatching. The pain of James's betrayal hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something less acute, a dull ache rather than a sharp stab. I'd accepted that our relationship might never recover, but I'd also discovered I could still find joy and meaning in life despite that loss. One cool autumn evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I received a text from James, the first contact in nearly 2 months. Can we talk in person, please? I hesitated, memories of the poisoned drink still vivid before typing my reply. Yes, tomorrow at noon, the cafe on Main. Whatever happened next, I knew I'd be approaching it from a place of strength and clear boundaries rather than desperate hope or misplaced guilt. The mother who would have done anything to maintain a relationship with her son regardless of how she was treated no longer existed. In her place was a woman who had learned the hardest lesson of parenthood. Sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing people to face the consequences of their own actions. Looking back now on everything that happened since that fateful family dinner, I realized that the experience, painful as it was, gave me something precious: freedom. Freedom from manipulation, from guilt, from the endless cycle of giving that was never enough. Freedom to rediscover who I am outside of being James's financial safety net. Sarah once asked me if I regretted my decision to cancel the mortgage payments. Do you ever wonder if you went too far? She questioned gently. I thought about it carefully before answering. No, I told her. What I regret is not setting boundaries sooner. I regret allowing things to reach a point where such a drastic step became necessary. That's the truth I've come to embrace. Family relationships should be built on mutual respect and love, not exploitation and cruelty. Blood ties create a connection, but they don't justify abuse or entitle anyone to financial support at the expense of another's dignity. James and I have limited contact now. He's slowly rebuilding his life, working a steady job for the first time in years, living within his means in a small apartment. There's a humility to him that wasn't there before, though. Whether it's genuine or simply a new strategy remains to be seen. Amanda, surprisingly, has become a more positive presence. After finalizing her divorce, she returned to school to become a paramedic, a career choice that would have seemed unthinkable for the status-conscious woman I first met. She occasionally stops by with coffee, our conversations cautious, but increasingly comfortable. As for me, I've learned that it's never too late to set boundaries, to demand respect, to prioritize your own well-being. The act of standing up for myself after years of acquiescence has rippled through every aspect of my life, strengthening other relationships and opening doors to new possibilities. My relationship with Richard has deepened into something wonderful and supportive. My friendships are more authentic because I no longer fear conflict or disapproval. Even my connection with Sarah and her family has grown stronger, built on honest communication rather than martyrdom. The saddest truth I've had to accept is that sometimes those who should love us the most are capable of the deepest betrayal. My son plotted to humiliate me, to literally poison me for his amusement. That knowledge will always hurt. But the most empowering truth I've embraced is that we always have choices in how we respond to betrayal. And choosing self-respect isn't selfish, it's necessary. If there's one message I'd like to share from my experience, it's this. Love doesn't require you to be a doormat. Setting boundaries isn't punishing others, it's protecting yourself. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone who consistently mistreats you is to stop enabling their behavior. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who betrayed your trust? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life experiences. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this story, share it with them. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone in our struggles is the greatest gift we can receive. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself.